The first question is, what do you do when you feel like you're not learning from your job? Would you recommend to get a career coach, especially when you're not sure about the next steps?
When there's a couple of ways to answer that. One, I wouldn't take I have, had coaches, we have a career coach that I've used internally for different points in my career. I've also helped my team currently find different career coaches. I do think career coaches play a role. It's a big investment, so I think sometimes if the answer is obvious to you and it's clear that you're in a position that's stagnant and you need to move, I don't know that you need a career coach as much as you need somebody on your board to sort of kick you in the pants and tell you it's time to make a move. But I do think career coaches do play an important role in a lot of situations. What I would say, just based on my experience, is not learning is a pretty bold statement to make. Part of the challenge that I put on myself, and I got to really experience this when I was the staffing manager for the Chicago office several years ago, is every situation is a situation to learn. The way we think about it, there's problem solving, there's client communication skills, and there's team skills. I think what happens is people sort of latch on and say, I need to learn Alteryx, or I need to learn, Python on this next project or on this next assignment, or I need to learn customer segmentation, and I'm not learning that. Okay, but you might be in a situation where you're working with a manager or you're working with a customer or a general manager whose personality type is one that you've never worked with before. And you can learn how to work with somebody of that personality type. And I think part of the challenge to managing your career and not getting super anxious is recognizing that all of the types of learning that you're getting on at least those three dimensions, the way we think about it, but it's analogous to other situations, all of those are an opportunity to learn. And so I do think that sometimes if you claim you're not learning anything, it's because you're being a little bit stubborn and you're not learning the things that you feel like you want to learn right now. And you're missing out on all the other opportunities that you can have to be learning as you're navigating your career. So I do think before you say, I'm going to hire a career coach because I'm leaving, you should think about, well, what am I learning here? Am I learning how to be a self-motivator, right? Which could be a problem. They're not serving me anything and I feel bored, I'm not learning. Okay, well, maybe this is one of those times where you should take on a project or start a project. And I would just sort of, Dennis, put that little check in there to make sure you're not jumping the gun and being intellectually lazy about how to learn.
Fantastic. Next question is, you mentioned 2 by 11. How did you deal with the constant change? Did you have a top level goal in your career? And with all these changes, were you looking to achieve that top goal? Or did you just develop new interests over time and it evolved?
Yeah, it's a very fair question, and I'll try and answer it briefly. In consulting, a lot of times there is sort of a stair step up or out with promotion points every 2 to 3 years. So some of that is by design in a way that many people in industry may not have the opportunity or option of pursuing. I do think that when I would like to say that I had those 3 questions in mind as I was going through the 22-year journey. I think in retrospect, those questions emerged as the way that I thought about the decisions at the different decision points. When I joined the firm, I actually got interested in consulting and joined consulting because I wanted somebody to pay for business school. And so when I heard, I was like, oh, they pay for school? I want to do that. What do they do? In that order, right? So I knew, I would say, up to 2 years after business school, what my career plan was going to be. And that's when I actually started thinking, do I want to be a manager and make that run over the next 2 years? Or is it time to think about something different? Ultimately, I did interview for roles and I got a job literally the same week I got promoted to manager. But when I thought about those 3 questions of what the path forward would look like on the 2 different paths, staying was the right answer. But at every point in my career, I sort of go through that. And I take, there is a slide in the longer version of this about how to manage sort of executive recruiters and search firms that come looking. I do take all of those calls because if I'm going to work this hard, I need to be able to tell my family that I've looked, this is truly the best role for me. But those 3 questions are how I manage that.
Great, fantastic. There's 2 questions, one public, one private, and they're about the same.
Okay.
I feel like there seems to be a trade-off between being in a highly paid, highly prestigious job and then having solid family time and not being able to have that. So how have you managed to balance the 2 aspects of that?
Yeah, I would say very clearly what I said on that first slide matters a lot to me. And setting boundaries and sticking to them. And at different points in my career, I've had options or opportunities put in front of me that I was told were the only or best path forward. And I turned them down and said, if you feel like that's what you're going to do, go ahead and staff me to that or put me on that. And I will probably be leaving before the project is done, but it's a business, do what you have to do. I think it's important from my perspective that you realize you're an adult. And when you open your eyes in the morning, by the grace of God, you decide where you're going to spend your time. I may be your supervisor, but I can't actually make you do anything. And so at the end of the day, you choose whether or not you're going to be home for your anniversary. You choose whether or not you're going to go to the game. Now, the consequences of those decisions are real, and I don't want to minimize that. But at different points in time, I've decided this is important to me. I'm going to do it. And maybe the consequence of that means that at 10 o'clock when we get home from the band performance, I'm back online until midnight. That's a trade-off that I've been willing to make. But that's a personal decision for me. But I do think that it's important that it is important that you set those boundaries and that you stick to them and understand when you're going to flex them, that you do them. For me personally, a very tangible example, my wife likes to celebrate her birthday on her birthday, not the weekend before, not the weekend after, on her birthday. And if that's a Tuesday, it doesn't sneak up on me. I know when it is every year. I will not be traveling on her birthday. And that's just, at this point in the game, people just understand that's one of my rules and we work around it. So I would be flexible on it, but I would also recognize that you don't have to make the trade-off. You just have to be disciplined about your boundaries and stick to them. And I think ultimately, in times like this, having been through a longer career, seeing, everybody's dreams go up in smoke during the dot-com bubble, dealing with the crisis and the drama and the reevaluation of priorities after 9/11. And right now, even, is a moment in time where I think people are realizing what's really important in their lives. And I think you should take away from that what matters most. And it's not the end of the world if somebody comes strolling in the middle of a webinar call or something. It's not that big a deal. And some of those things from this crisis, I hope stay, and I hope they stay with you. But you'll realize that, focus on what matters, and ultimately you'll be happy, even if you're not in the same role that you're in today.
Great. A couple more questions.
Sure.
What advice
would you
give to someone that's transitioning from being a subject matter expert for 15 years and then being asked by senior management to take up a generalist role with a greater upside?
I think that trade-off is a little bit of a false trade-off because, and we get this question a lot. I get this question a lot because I have, 2 engineering degrees and then went into management consulting. I didn't take any real business classes, with all due respect to Sloan's undergraduate classes. I didn't take any real business classes. I had never seen a financial statement. I had never done accounting. And what I think is important from a confidence standpoint is focus on the things that made you successful as a subject matter expert. The ability to go really deep on something, the ability to get down the learning curve, the ability to sort of take that expertise. And when something comes up that's a totally different situation than one that the expertise necessarily lends itself to, you're able to just very quickly apply the same frameworks and the same thought process. And I think a lot of times people tend to think about new situations as, I've never done this before. And the truth is, you kind of have. Right? It's taking a complex data set. It's working with a set of customers you didn't know before. You don't know this customer segment, but you've worked with new customers before. And so I tend to advise people to look for the similarities and recognize that your differences and your different perspective is actually an asset. Because if being a generalist and not knowing, sort of the specifics or the details of any situation, or knowing the details of any situation is all that was needed, you wouldn't, people would have solved it already and they wouldn't need you to do it. So I actually wouldn't be self-conscious about moving into areas that you don't know and moving away from your expertise. I would rely on the fact that, unlike a lot of people who have strictly been on one side or the other, you actually did develop an expertise and you actually know what it takes to be a world-class expert at something. And when you get put on something new, you can actually teach people how to get down the learning curve really quickly because you've done it before. And in that context, you're new in one way, but you're actually more experienced in another way. And at least that sort of changes your psyche and changes the confidence that you bring with yourself to meetings. That's been my experience of watching multiple people navigate that here and at my clients.
Fantastic. Have you ever been asked to work on clients or projects that went against your values? And if so, how did you manage that without offending senior stakeholders?
So I personally have not. I also will say that of all the clients that I've worked with, I have never seen a client or been a part of a conversation that I thought was unethical or questioned my values, where I kind of went, wait, what did they say? Most of the clients that I've worked with were very mission driven and were very clear when there were forks in the road and moments of truth that this is who we are, this is what we do, we take care of our people, even in very difficult difficult situations. And in my expertise and the stuff that I worked on was very sensitive in a lot of ways, working in healthcare, working on, creating shared service centers, et cetera. But I've always been very impressed with the executives that I've had a chance to work with. What I can say is I have had those conversations. I was the staffing manager in the office. I've worked in aerospace and defense. I've worked in the casino industry, all of those things. I would say that, at least I can speak for our company, we are very accommodating for people who have sort of objections to the types of clients that they could be asked to work on for a variety of reasons. And we accommodate that. I do think, again, back to first principles, you have to be willing to understand what you're willing to trade off on and what you're not. And I would actually be a little bit, I am encouraged that I work for a place where they're accommodating and understand that of people. I'd be a little concerned if I worked at a place that didn't, and they sort of said, look, we pay you, go do what we told you to do. If that's the mindset on situations where there are clear moral conflicts with what you're being asked to do, your long-term prospects at that place may not be as promising as you had hoped. And so maybe that's the universe's way, depending on your faith, of telling you it's time to make a move.
Great. And one more final question is actually very much Bain related. Does Bain, or do you place a value on contextual recruitment, i.e. valuing a candidate's application and achievements in the context of their background? If so, how would you recommend a candidate gets that information across?
Yeah, so first I'll point to a couple of different things. And since you brought up Bain, I was trying to stay company agnostic in a lot of this. I will say we're running Experience Bain right now. So if you go to our website, bain.com/careers, you can register for that and get to know more about us and how we think about recruiting. Dennis, I would also point to a video titled What Bain Looks For, which is me talking with a member of my team on YouTube. And it gives a good rundown of what we're looking for in candidates. I would say that, yes, broadly speaking, we are looking at the diversity of backgrounds that people have and looking at their achievements and their accomplishments in the context that they were in. Again, this is back to a little bit of the question around specializing and moving into a more generalist track and things like that. But we recognize the diversity of opinions and diversity of expertise and diversity of backgrounds not only helps us get to better answers for our clients, it helps us understand what our clients are going through in a way that's very different. Our clients' customer bases, their employee bases are diverse. We understand that we need a team of people that reflects the diversity, not just because we get to a better answer and it's a more energizing place to work. We also think it helps us understand our clients' context better. And so it actually, there's a host of reasons diversity matters. In the context of this question, it actually helps us understand what we're trying to do as professional services firms. So we do look at all of those factors. And it's important that you just, again, extrapolate from the experiences. I like to tell people when they're applying to business schools, some people will have done amazing things because they just happened to be in the right place at the right time. They were working in investment bank and got put on the biggest deal of the year. They had nothing to do with that, but they'll talk about it like they did. They just happened to get put on this project by accident because they were the one that they walked past in the hallway. The reality is that I think the important thing to think about for me is how much did you get and how much did you do with the opportunities that you were given? And how far did you take those given your circumstances? And we do a good job, I think, and a lot of companies do a very good job of understanding, wow, if you could do this starting from here, imagine what you could do if I gave you a platform at Bain or a platform at another company. Imagine what you could do if you took this and made this out of it. My goodness, what if I gave you this? Then what would it be like? And I think that's an important thing for people to keep in mind. We do try and factor that in. And I would just articulate it in your cover letter and in the other conversations you're having with people along the way. I don't think that's necessarily unique to us, Dennis. I think the companies that get talent acquisition right are paying attention to that in today's world, in today's economy, where there's just a lot more diversity of backgrounds and experiences and expertise.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I know we've overrun slightly.
Sorry. Thank you.
But sorry for that. But no, it's been a fantastic session. And I can see from the feedback there's lots of questions. And I will, if people wanted to get in touch with you, is there any way which you prefer that to happen?
There's a couple of different things. Our email addresses are not super hard to figure out. I only take LinkedIn connections from people that I do know, but I do respond to every outreach. So if you do send an invite and include a note with a question, I will absolutely respond to you. It might just take me a minute, but you can do that. And I'm also, again, email, LinkedIn. I'm also on the Reddit consulting forum. I'm Keith from Bain. And people have not been shy about asking questions to me on there, either in private messages or on the chat room. But I will get back to everyone. Just give me a couple of days, and I'll take care of it. Thanks for inviting me, Dennis. This was really great. I appreciate all the questions and commentary flying by in the chat window.